Hi, everyone. This is the Drone Dialogues presents Technical and Tactical with Rick and Rick. I'm Rick. He's Rick.
So
Anyway,
we're Rick and Rick.
yeah. So, what we wanted to talk today is about this document, this trial that is coming up. Uh,
It's happened.
it's happened.
Yeah,
Okay.
the Supreme Court has heard it.
Okay. So, uh, Dad, with no further ado, let's get into this, and then as a coda, we will briefly talk about the current state of the election because while we are not really into like you and I talk politics a lot,
Yeah.
yeah, but we're not into being like the loud mumbo jumbo. My opinion matters more because I'm a veteran and I drink whiskey and smoke a cigar, wear a backwards baseball cap. Uh, these opinion the state of the election is relevant to the future of the firearms industry. So, but first, let's talk about this trial. You inform me because I haven't really followed up with you on it.
Okay. Let me talk about the firearms industry just for about a minute and a half. If if you have the opportunity to buy ammunition right now, I highly recommend you buy it. 9 millimeter prices are prices of pre-Trump. You can get 9 millimeter or different places for 11.95 for 50. Now I'm talking about target practice. You're going to spend a little bit more for what you want to, critical defense, high end federal stuff that you're going to carry on your everyday carry. And firearms. The firearms industry is in serious trouble right now. If you haven't been following, there's people that are cutting back. People are shutting doors, laying people off, and it's pretty simple math. I've been paying 45% more for gas for 3 years or 4 years, 50% more for groceries, and my income hasn't gone up. I'm not a mathematician, but it doesn't add up. So sooner or later, this free money that I had to buy toys disappears. So if there's an opportunity for you right now to pick up a firearm or some ammunition, it'll benefit you and it will help the firearms industry.
You know what they're going to end up buying though, Dad? 90% of the people who watch this, they're going to buy a new flashlight for their gun. Because on X today, oh, so and so says he doesn't need a flashlight. Back and forth. I commented, offset.
we,
You
we,
can't
we
you
just,
can't preach to these mental retards, man. Anyway, go ahead.
I'm going to say it real quick. We've discussed flashlights before.
Yeah.
It's an accessory. If you need one, buy one. You don't need to spend $300 for a flashlight. I can tell you that right now. But
I'm just belaboring your point. Is is ammunition uh, and firearms ownership? If you could afford one or the other, get ammunition, right?
I would stockpile ammunition right now
Yeah.
because I hate to say this. I want Trump to be elected, but if he gets elected, no one's going to be doing fear buying and the prices are going to keep dropping, which is good for us, the guys who shoot once a week or once every 2 weeks. That's phenomenal because now I can, spend $20 and I don't have a sponsor and I don't shoot 30,000 rounds a year. I,
Absolutely.
I have to pay for it out of my pocket. So it gives me the opportunity to shoot more. I mean, I have all the guns I need right now. I don't need to buy any more. But what we're going to discuss today is the Vanderstock case that went and got heard at the Supreme Court. And what this is about is frames and receivers. What is a frame or receiver? Do a set of parts and an 80%, which is a non firearm, become a firearm? And after 12, 15 years or even longer, ATF tried to change their policy. So if you're familiar with what an 80% non-firearm is, it's a firearm that's reached a stage of manufacturing where it is not classified as a firearm. It's just still considered, it looks like it's got the outward shape, but it's not finished enough to be assembled into a shooting firearm. Out of the clear blue, ATF decided that if you had a non-firearm with the set of parts for that firearm that you're in possession of a firearm. And they did it without changing the law. They just wrote a regulation. Now, 1 month before this rule came out, ATF was being sued by the Gifford Group on frames of receivers. And ATF used the defense that we're using today, that this combination is not a firearm, in writing. And if you can pull up the Gifford lawsuit, because ATF won that lawsuit because they said it's not a firearm. So lo and behold, they decided to write the frame of receiver rule. And said, if you possess this device that I said was not a firearm 10 years ago, 20 years ago, all of a sudden when you have a set of parts with it, it has become a firearm. Now, ATF has been spanked on this in the Fifth Circuit. And it was the whole rule was vacated. So ATF asked for emergency certification by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, we can't vacate the whole rule because there's some things in the rule that ATF can do. ATF can tell you where to mark your firearm. ATF can tell you that you must mark it in a certain amount of time. ATF can tell you what to manufacture. So Vanderstock sued ATF, and ATF asked for Supreme Court review, and that's got listened to on Tuesday. So basically, the Solicitor General and the attorney for Vanderstock put on their case to the Supreme Court, and it was good, but it wasn't great.
Mm-hmm.
Because listening to the Supreme Court justices, they don't always give you what they're going to say. They ask certain questions. They may be playing the devil's advocate. They may be asking a question against the plaintiff that they really want the answer to know what the defense is going to say. And so you don't know. Then they'll have their, as you know, they'll have their law clerks do research. So after the hearing, when both sides put on their case, then the Supreme Court really gets down to business and really goes through this. So as part of this, I was asked to write an amicus brief for an attorney named Bradley Benbrook out of California. And we worked together on this. And so I talked about how this firearm is put together, how much it takes, because what ATF does is, I hate to say they falsify or they embellish, I should say. They misconceive. So they'll say, okay, it'll only take you 20 minutes to drill the remaining holes out of this thing. So since that's all it takes, it is a firearm if you have the parts. Well, that's not what the law says. If I drill those remaining holes, I am making a firearm. And everybody knows that. I'm making or manufacturing a firearm. If the holes are not there, that doesn't automatically, because I imagine them to be there, make it mean that I can assemble a firearm out of that parts kits. And to say it only takes 20 minutes is a misconception. And I'm a machinist. I'm a gunsmith. I've been doing this for a long time. So I have all the tools available to do this. In their language, they said anybody can do this. So let's take, I use real Rick. Do you have machinist tools? Do you have all this stuff necessary? No.
I don't
now
even.
you got to.
I don't even have a table saw.
So now you got to research the tools you need. You got to research the parts. You got to watch a couple of YouTube videos to figure out how to put this gun together, and how even the manufacturer's directions are pretty good. You're going to watch a YouTube video. So now I take all of that together, and that's a combination of a few hours. So ATF has just thrown that into trash and says, oh, I sit down and I can put this together in 20 minutes. Rick, I can, because I sit on my workbench and I have all the tools necessary. I know what size drill bits there are. I know everything. I could do it in 20 minutes. And here's the other thing. These polymer 80s, which is the biggest foundation, and copies of polymer 80s are based on the Glock. They are not precision made. A Glock has a rail that is embedded into plastic when the plastic is poured and molded. And this thing is precision. You can take 500 Glocks apart of the same model, put them in a bucket, and put 500 guns together without knowing which part came from which part. Well, now with this homemade polymer 80, I have to insert a rail, drill a hole, mount this rail with a pin. Who's to say my pin's not going to wobble? Who's not to say I'm going to over drill the plastic? The majority of these guns do not work the first time they put together because they are not precision items. They're being made by Pogo and Sluggo and Jolene and all these people sitting at their workbench and putting tools together. Oh, this drill bit says a drill bit an inch and a quarter. Well, I'll use an inch and an eighth. That's good enough. And that is a fact of life. So then they get into the tracing data. And I worked on this amicus brief, me and Benbrook wrote it together, and then I assisted with the amicus brief on the tracing. That is just flat out bullshit data. And how do I know that? Because I can tell you, I used to travel to Central America, South America, uh, Haiti, and bring back data from the people we were working with because we were looking for trafficking schemes. What ATF would do, the tracing center would take this and load it into their tracing database and count that as guns traced. There's no trace. It was so, our numbers were so big when I was still there that the year I left Firearms Technology, there was a request as why did the tracers numbers go down so low in 1 year? I brought back from Haiti alone a disc with approximately 30,000 numbers on it. And so those, look at those numbers that were, so the data in the tracing system is crap. I also was required to go from state to state and go through guns in police departments. And along with a team, we had a team that did this, and we would trace guns that had been sitting there for years. There were murder weapons, as you name it. They're sitting in the wall and never been traced. We're trying to train these people to trace guns, and the locals don't give a shit about tracing gun. If they pick you up and you shot somebody, they got you. They don't care if that gun shot somebody else. They have you right then and there. So we bumped heads a lot, and those numbers were also entered in the tracing database. Then I'm going to tell you a specific incident. I was sitting at my desk late day. It's like 5 o'clock, 5:30, and I was thinking about I'm going to get the hell out of here one day. And a gentleman from the tracing center comes running down, says, "We need somebody to look at these numbers today. Senator Feinstein is looking for 50 caliber trace firearms, and we ran the system for 50 caliber, and this is what we got." And it was a 12-inch stack of traces. So I'm like, holy crap. So I looked out to see who was still in the office, and I won't mention their names, but two of my regular hard workers were still there. And so we sat down and went through this stack of 12 inches of traces, over 1,000 traces. We found 450 calibers that had been traced. Only one had been traced in a crime. The other trace documents were 50 caliber muzzle loaders. Law enforcement was tracing muzzle loaders. So we just did a called up tracing. Hey, I won't mention the name. We just went through everything. You can come back and get it. Here's the, here's the 4 guns or 6 guns, whatever it was. And there was only, they called DC. We don't need that data anymore. So I can personally tell you that the tracing data is absolute crap. So now I'm taking a step further. So I'm helping this gentleman out writing the amicus brief for the trace data. And they say, well, they say that this many thousand ghost guns were traced. So I said, well, how do they know? What are they tracing?
Yeah,
That's what you got to find out.
exactly. How can you trace something that is a ghost gun?
Man, I'm gonna give you a PhD in rocket science. You are so smart. At the same time I'm working on this, one of my counterparts, I won't mention a name, who does tracing for his department, happened to call me up. I am not joking. He goes, "Hey, the tracing center just put a drop down icon for ghost guns." What? Just this? It was July or August. How the F you been tracing ghost guns then? So what did they do? They basically probably took everything that said unknown, no serial number, no identification, and they pulled it and said that was a trace firearm. So I haven't read his amicus brief. I need to read it to see, but I helped him work on this. Like I did this amicus brief, of course, at no charge. I helped the other one at no charge because this is a time of firearms that we need to pull in and beat things like the vanish. Like I said, I worked on the bump stock, the arm brace, the FRT trigger, and these things take time, and a lot of times these people don't have the money to pay for these lawsuits. So GOA will come in with some money. Somebody else, I won't mention, two great organizations that are always asking for donations, and they run magazines, and they're supposedly our friends, but they never seem to be putting in money for this or providing an attorney. Uh, so
So someone like the National Rim Job Association.
I'm not calling out names. I call
That
out names.
I'll call them out. The National Rim
I
Job
call
Association.
I
Oh,
call
oh,
out
maybe the R
good
stands for something else. Never heard of them.
the good guys. I call them out. The good guys. We always call them out. So this amicus brief is about what is going to be called a firearm, and does the government have the authority to write or change a law? Now, according to the government didn't change the law. They say this was just a regulation, and they do have the authority. But when you look at the definition of firearm in the Gun Control Act, even when you look at the minutes and the discussion of the Gun Control Act, it specifically says parts are not regulated. In plain language, parts are not regulated. So all of a sudden now, after ATF has used this argument to their benefit for years and years, now they change their mind with a regulation, not a law, because that's Congress' job. So that's where we're at today. This got heard on Tuesday of this week, and will probably be months before we get the results back. But that was the Vanderstock versus DOJ Garland on what is a frame or receiver, and when does it become a firearm, with a parts kit, without a parts kit. I say now, I work for ATF, and I wrote opinions now that when I look back, I think about, well, was I that accurate? But on the other hand, there's nothing in the regulations that tells you when a piece of metal becomes a firearm.
It, it,
So,
uh, you know, can I swing? Can I pick up a 2x4 and swing a 2x4?
of course,
Can I pick up a 2x4 and swing it as someone is throwing a ball in my direction? Yes.
that's a good point. Yes,
D-
you can.
does that make it a baseball bat
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
or a cricket bat? Whatever.
Yes, that's a good analogy. They had some good analogies. So what we did is we came up with a plan to help the industry, because let's say you sent in a 1911, and this is what they were all based on, 1911s and AR-15s at the time, and said, I want to cut this much metal and it not be a firearm. Well, then I would send in another piece and say, well, I want to cut it differently. So what we arbitrarily did, Mike Curtis did the 1911. Adam Galbraith did the AR-15. Remember, I always call out good guys.
Mm-hmm.
So Adam Galbraith wrote the opinion on what would be an 80% AR, and Mike Curtis what would be and we based everything on those. The public and the manufacturing industry loved it because we actually wrote a standard. So nobody fought with us and says, well, you said as long as I don't do these three modifications, it's not going to be considered a firearm, because they were happier than hell. But when you look back at it, we would have never got by with this. In reality, if one major hole is not drilled in that piece of metal where it can be assembled into a shooting firearm, it should not be regulated as a firearm. And I've put that in writing since I left ATF. But at the time, I thought that we did the best we could for the manufacturers and for the individuals. And we never had one single complaint that says, we don't like what you did.
Yeah, and I mean, and this sort of ties back into the whole buying of ammunition. I and I think most casual firearm owners, ones who aren't on social media and just go and do their, ping, 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 just to stay fresh every quarter. I think a lot of them don't really think about the slow approach of the totalitarian means that, especially the Democrat Party, but unfortunately, occasionally you'll see some of the, some people might call them rhinos, siding with more and more regulation. Lest we forget, it was Trump who banned the bump stock, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Lest we forget that Reagan, while governor in California, passed some firearms laws that were unconstitutional.
The Firearms Owners Protection Act, with the implementation of 9220, no new machine guns could be sold to the general public,
Yeah.
was under Reagan.
That was 86, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So, um, a lot of people do want to make Americans as safe and neutered as, you know, go to England, meet your average English guy. He's tiny, pudgy, or skinny and looks lifeless, uh, because there's just no machismo, no ability to fight anything. And they want us like that. They want us neutered. They want us sterile, disarmed, be it by the pen or at gunpoint. And this isn't like some anti-government screed I'm making at all. You and I both very well know there are tons of people in government who the last thing they'd ever want to see is more firearms laws. Some of the biggest gun enthusiasts they ever worked in the federal government, oftentimes in law enforcement. Uh, but so while you were talking, I pulled up the case, and you're looking at like a lot of these justices, uh, and I'll say it, it's the women.
Yes.
It's not. It is. Oh, I have to protect my dear, my little retard at home. Blah blah blah. I mean, Amy Coney, um, Amy Coney Barrett is right now agreeing with the Solicitor General on this course case. It's saying right there, and then Ketanji Brown Jackson is also agreeing, which we expect.
Well, that's a known.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people assume that because Amy Coney Barrett, and I'm not gonna badmouth her or throw her on the bus. I'm just gonna state some real facts. That Amy Coney Barrett is a woman, she's a mother, and she is Catholic. And I'm not anti-Catholic. Well, anyway, I'm not anti-Catholic, right? But I do understand that within Catholicism, there is a very liberal attitude of their parishioners towards gun rights. Because, with Catholics being very pro-life and very anti-death penalty, there is this reservation they have of, not believing that guns just jump up and start murdering children, Uh, so I just wanted to sort of say that, like, while we look at the facts of the case, we have seen the Supreme Court for our lives that oftentimes will use the bench to become an activist. I mean, Thurgood Marshall even essentially said that sometimes the court does need to be an activist. You know,
Well, one of the things that came out, I think it was Justice Alito, the Solicitor General said if only one hole has to be drilled, then it's a firearm. So he said, well, don't you only have to drill one hole in an AR-15 to make it a machine gun? So under your concept, and if this stands, wouldn't it mean that all AR-15s in the United States are now machine guns?
and that's probably their goal. That's probably why
It
they want to
is.
pass this. Yeah, yeah.
And of course, they basically said, well, no, that's a different category. Well, when it comes to manufacturing or making, there is no category. If you say it takes one hole to turn this into a firearm, then that would also apply to the manufacturing or the making of a machine gun. Because that's where they use the misdirection. Because this isn't assembly. Assembly is I have a set of parts on my desk and I put them together into a car, whatever it might be. Manufacturing or making a good what's the furniture store that sells everything IKEA.
IKEA.
You put everything together and there's a hole for everything and a screw for everything. But if I go to a like a rudimentary carpentry store, it says, you need to cut these slots and this and that. You're making the carpentry. You are making the firearm when you start drilling holes to hang components on it. So the making and the manufacturing would not only apply to the Gun Control Act with a handgun or rifle, it would apply to the National Firearms Act on the making or manufacturing of a machine gun. So if this thing goes through, then that's going to be the next fight or one of the next fights that they'll be looking at. We think that all AR-15s, and they've already said it in plain language on other cases, that AR-15s are basically machine guns that don't shoot automatic yet.
Well, I mean, I know I can pull the trigger pretty fast, Dad. You know, I'm, yeah.
Well, I've demonstrated bump fire.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Anybody, I've demonstrated that, on camera.
yeah,
You can take an R-15, an AK, or basically anything that has an inertia that when you pull the trigger and hold it in place, it'll rock back and forth and fire on it automatically. Well,
yeah,
that's not automatic. That's bump fire. It'll bump fire rapidly on its own.
yeah. I mean, so at that point, you would have to regulate yourself because since you're the one making automatic, you would be the machine gun, and therefore you
I'm
have
the
to go to jail.
conversion device.
Yeah,
What they would say is because these firearms are so adept to shooting rapidly by the person, there has to have some type of design change so that it can't fire that way because you can't regulate the person. So then they would make the manufacturers find a design change so that you couldn't bump fire anymore.
I mean, well, they can regulate the person. They just make up some charges and throw them in jail. Not that I would have
That's
anything about that.
that's a good point. But I want to jump back into shooting. One of the things that I always do, I do it mentally anymore, is before I go to the range, I think about what I'm going to do. I let's say I can afford a $15 or less box of 9mm, and that's all I can afford this month. So I'm going to go to the range with 50 rounds. Well, I want to get the most out of that 50 rounds. Well, I know that the best aspect in case somebody's looking is to load three 15-round magazines and shoot from the holster and try to empty out each magazine as fast as I can because I want to look cool. And I'm down to 5 rounds to finish off. Well, what if I load a magazine with 3 rounds? Now I'm gonna answer that because I'm a FUD and I know it, but I'm gonna answer that for the real experts. This is what they're gonna say. So now with 15 rounds, I can do 5 magazine changes, 3 rounds apiece. and I can draw from the holster if I carry a holster 5 times, and I can check my position, my sight alignment, everything 5 times. Well, what the real experts, because I'm not a real expert, are going to say is, well, if you do that, you're going to mess up your muzzle memory. And then if you have to get into a firefight, you're only going to think that you have a 3 round magazine. So I want to get that out there as soon as somebody, the experts are going to tell you that. They're going to criticize you because muscle memory is a big thing, you know. So if I shoot 5 magazines of 3 rounds apart, or 3 rounds each, but in real life, I carry a magazine with 15 rounds. When I'm shooting my magazine with 15 rounds in this big gunfight I'm going to get into in Walmart, I'm going to want to change magazines every 3 rounds because I've ruined my muscle memory by doing that
you're you're
technique.
you're never going to be the same, and never going to be
I,
the same. You're ruined for life.
well, I can tell you, I have trained a lot of people shooting. I've trained tier one, I've trained agents, and I do the 3 rounds in a magazine drill for the simple reason that I want them changing magazines as many times as possible and maximizing the amount of ammunition. Of course, we generally have more than a 50 round box of ammo. But when you go to the range, basically have a plan. I mean, I'm going to shoot 5 rounds at 15 yards, 5 rounds at 50 yards, 30 rounds at 15 yards, whatever it may be. Maximize the ammunition because these guys on TV that are shooting with 2 ammo cans full of ammunition, they've got a sponsor, or they've got money, or they've won matches and they've got ammunition to burn. And in this economy, all of us do not have ammunition to burn. So come up with it, whatever plan it may be. Even if you load it with 15 rounds per magazine, you know what? Shoot three, reholster, shoot three, reholster. Get the most you can. But as a world renowned FUD, I would recommend doing uh, uh, 3 rounds to a magazine or 2 rounds to a magazine, whatever it may be, just to practice all your skills at one time.
Uh, you know, also not being an expert or a historically good shooter, I don't have a certificate in my room of shooting the top score at one of the best law enforcement academies for shooting in America. No, no, no. It's totally not still in the certificate thing. It's not in my bedroom. I'll never show it to anybody, because it's not real. Um, I would also say there is nothing wrong if you're poor, or if you can't, or gosh, if you don't have the time, you might work a 60-hour week.
Absolutely.
There's nothing wrong with dry firing with dummy rounds. Buy some dummy
Yes.
rounds. Practice your reloads. Uh, practice yanking that magazine whenever you have a misfire.
I'm so glad you said dummy rounds because I have a box full of 9 millimeter. I have 45, the orange plastic rounds.
Yeah.
If you're at your house, take all the live ammunition out, and when you're doing practice, and use the orange plastic rounds because they're so easy to see, and it's hard to make a mistake if you're using them.
It,
And we're just giving you little tips that
and also, what I would say is, it you can also use dummy rounds at the range. If you're shooting with a buddy, or if you're someone who can easily forget, or don't, or because you can learn to load without looking at, after a certain point, right? Learn to load your ammunition with your eyes closed. And what you do, like, let's say you have a 12-round magazine, you put you mix up the dummy rounds, but have these only be range dummy rounds, right? You have your separate ones at home, right? And also, if you're not checking the chamber and doing your thing to make sure you have a safe weapon, don't shoot, don't dry fire it away. They just get rid of your gun because you need to do that stuff, right? Um, when you go to the range, blind load your rounds with some dummy rounds, so you get a malfunction on the range. So you are in the heat. You do have the sense, the sight, the hearing. You're half deaf even with your headphones on, right? uh, Make it so that you can simulate the battle as much as possible, right? So, but yeah, uh, yeah, we often call them fake ninjas. You know, the wannabe seals, and some of them unfortunately are real seals and real former operators, and it is a lot of it is a dick measuring contest. Unfortunately, um, I'm I'm not going to name names because they're humans. I'm a Christian, um, and and my days of like saying this person is an a hole, that person's an a hole is over. Um, but someone posted a video, and I won't get into too much detail because people would know exactly what video I'm talking about, and and I don't want to attack this person, right? Because they're overweight, right? But it was a video that comments were like, "Oh, that's awesome! I wish I could do that." And in the video, what I and some of the other um, uh, GunX people that are way below me, because I'm the chancellor of GunX, uh, they were like, "Oh, you know, that's awesome," blah blah blah. And but all I could notice, and obviously I'm not a thin guy. I probably still need to lose about 50 pounds, and I don't shoot anymore. But what I do is I work out minimum 3 days a week unless I'm sick, and generally 5 days a week because like we used to joke at the range, are you a 300 to 300? And I'm like, well, I regularly shoot a 300 out of 300 out of the range. They're like, no, you have to be fat because you weigh 300 pounds and then you can shoot a 300 at the range. So therefore, you don't need to work out if you can shoot 300. You can just get fat. But anyone who has ever, especially guys who have served in combat, I haven't, and uh, guys who have trained for combat, I have. When you're already carrying anywhere from 50 to 100 pounds of extra gear, the last thing you want to do is be the guy winded. And as slow as I was in the military, I whenever we put on all the gear, I was as slow as everyone else because I trained. I still train. I still train for a battle that I'm probably never going to take part in. And but the guy in the video, he was rotund, and he had big arms, but a lot of guys have big arms, and you don't realize how much fat that is, and so he can barely hold this weapon. Like I said, I'm not going to be non-specific because I don't want to attack the guy. He's overweight, something he can work on, but he looked too fat to be doing this meme that he was doing. And it's the second rule. That's cool if you want to post guns. It's like if you tell me to post my guns, I assume you're an ATF agent until you prove otherwise. But anyway, I say post body mass index, post workout regimen, post diet, post caloric intake, because just like a filthy gun that won't shoot, if you are putting filth into your body and you are the automatic weapon, gun won't function. So, having said all that, as we know, there's an election coming up. Uh, Dad, who will you be voting for?
Well, I'm going to be voting for Trump, of
Okay.
course. I am not a Trump person.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I think he's got a lot of issues. Trump is the one who forced ATF. Well, they forced ATF to write the bump stock regulation, but the people at ATF, with the knowledge, should have said we can't do it, but they didn't. They said on national TV on the Hill, we found a way to do this. So leaders make comments at times, and it's their advisors who actually can make the ultimate decision on which way the leader will go. So I'm not a big Trump person. I love Trump, but we have absolutely no choice in the matter now.
Especially as firearms enthusiasts, firearm or 2A supporters, correct?
When you just think about three things, our rights as firearms owner, the border, and the economy. If there's if you can even think about voting for the Democrat right now, there's something wrong with you.
First of all, I agree with everything you said. Second of all, and I keep hearing this, is this like women voting for abortion rights? If you are a single issue voter, your single issue should be freedom. And all those things you just mentioned are freedom. Now, I understand. I consider myself very much in the middle on the pro-choice, pro-life argument, and that's all I'll say. We don't need to have that debate. This will never be the
Well,
venue for that argument.
I, I'm I'm not going to debate it either.
Yeah,
But when I look at some people on the Democratic Party, I wish your parents believed in abortion. I hate to say that, but you know, you want abortion so bad, then feel free to
they
go and abort your own children
they
and,
it's
and
nothing.
do a retroactive abortion.
It is a statement. It is a statement saying I think I should be able to have casual sex whenever I want. I think I should be able to never face the consequences for my actions. And I will pretend it's about rape and incest when really I couldn't give an F about safe, legal, and effective. I want to fetishize it. I want to put it on my TikTok. I want to put it on my Insta. Here's me. There's a video out there. Don't Google it, of a woman smiling because she's so happy she's getting an abortion. You have Gloria Steinem. I've had this many abortions. Whenever you like, and you and I mock the people who fetishize firearms. Whenever you fetishize anything, and then it is your single issue voting, you make me want to post the little photo that says repeal the 19th.
Anyway, we're not going to get too political about this. We're going to talk about at what's upcoming. It is a critical election. It is very critical, and you need to look at. I can't tell you to vote for Trump. I know the majority of people that ever listen to us are firearms owners. We have an opportunity to actually vote for somebody who's going to be on our side.
And I
And
also think he's learned the lesson from the bump stock thing. I I I,
I
I
agree with you there.
he made the mistake the first term of having these Washington insiders on his staff. I don't think he's going to make the same mistake, especially with Vance
I
as
agree.
his running mate.
Yeah, I agree. But you need to also follow these cases. Don't I don't want to be negative, but I have to say this. Don't just follow these talking heads that are giving you little bleeps every day to get their numbers up.
Yeah,
Pull down the case. Every time there's a Supreme Court hearing, there's oral arguments. Listen to the oral arguments yourself. Don't let me tell you what the oral arguments are.
and if it's someone who just needs a summary, there are people out there. There are journalists, some of them establishment and some of them independent, who will break down the case for you. You just got to find them on X or on some other social media feed. If you're one of those people that just feels like listening to it on your car ride home or whatever, there are Scotus podcasts that will cover everything that goes to the Supreme Court.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So I think we kind of covered everything that we needed to today,
yeah,
and it's been a while, and we are going to jump back on this. Me and Rick are going to talk about doing some videos about putting guns together and stuff like that. I'll do the work and send the videos to Rick and let him edit him
yeah,
and put some
absolutely.
talking points in there because we want to get this up and running. So please share what we talked about and uh, look at some of the writings. I always post them on my LinkedIn, and Rick's been good about posting them on X because I'm not good about social media. I'm a little bit too old.
Yeah,
And
I've been doing I've been posting a lot of stuff for you.
yes, yes. But other than that, thanks for listening to us, and have a great firearms day.
Yeah, have a good one, guys, and you have a good one too, Dad. Later.
I touched you soon. Bye bye.
Bye.